Thank you so much, and good morning and afternoon, depending on where you're all tuning in from on this webinar. And thank you so much to the U.S. Forest Service for providing this opportunity to share with such a national audience how a place like Los Angeles is really looking to address biodiversity and ecosystem health, climate resilience, and just general livability of our city. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Kat Superfisky, and I'm the City of Los Angeles' first and only urban ecologist. It's a role that was newly created back in November of 2019 to assist the City of Los Angeles in implementing a lot of these really, really great, ambitious goals that we have for addressing ecosystem health within the second largest metropolitan and urban area here within the U.S. My position was specifically funded through Councilmember Paul Koretz of Council District 5, who is a gentleman who's been introducing a lot of the really great ambitious motions and initiatives related to biodiversity and ecosystem health and climate resilience here in LA. My position was then nested actually specifically within the Department of City Planning, because one of my primary responsibilities here at the city is actually to assist the planning department and planners who are spearheading the wildlife pilot study, which I'll speak a little bit more about in a few minutes. While I've been on contract with the City of LA for about the past year, I've had the extreme pleasure of assisting, or what I like to call cross-pollinating, with a bunch of various different departments and initiatives, such as with Rachel Malarich, LA's City Forest Officer, who you just heard from. I see my role as an urban ecologist to really be one that is seeing and understanding ecological cities, or systems within cities, and to identify and develop really nice systems-based solutions that address not only the ecological systems themselves, but also the socio-political, the cultural, the economic systems that are inherently, inextricably linked to these ecological systems within such urban contexts. So what I hope to kind of convey through this brief presentation is the importance of taking this broader systems-based and collaborative approach to managing cities and the ecosystems within them, which definitely relates to the urban forest as well. So enhancing the urban forest will not just be achieved by focusing on individual tree species or on just individually looking at planting of trees alone. It's really essential to consider the larger landscape context where these specific trees are being planted, to ensure really the maximization of both these ecological as well as social benefits. So here in this slide you see a couple lonely black walnut trees on a semi-degraded hillside in northeast Los Angeles, an area that is really rapidly being developed with a lot of single-family residences. These black walnuts are a protected species here within the City of Los Angeles, and they're hanging on by a thread, and again, a lot of these degraded and heavily developed habitats. So it's not only important to be focusing on, the individual species and itself, but to really be looking at the ecosystem that it's within, which is also very marginalized and quickly disappearing. And if we then really zoom out to see the context of where those couple lonely black walnuts exist within the greater context of the region, we really start to see how important those individuals are and those properties and therefore patch habitats within northeast LA are at achieving kind of a larger contiguous landscape matrix, because you see that they serve as kind of this amazing central stepping stone in between a lot of the larger mountain ranges that we have surrounding our city here. And aside from focusing on this larger landscape context and these kind of larger ecological systems that individual species occur within, it's also really essential to be addressing the entire life cycle of a tree and all of the various steps and processes that need to be thought about and ensured, to ensure that the urban forest is actually enhanced and sustained over time. So everything from the seed itself to the plants all the way into the in-ground planting itself. So let's dive into the first point a little bit more of understanding kind of this bigger picture, this landscape context. As I mentioned, one of my main roles as an urban ecologist is to provide an ecological perspective in order to identify strategies for increasing health of an urban ecosystem. So to do this, I conduct a lot of what I call field observations, where essentially I go out and I read the landscape around me. And what that ends up entailing in a place like LA is me having to essentially peel back the concrete and steel and infrastructural layers that create our cities today to kind of see the large landscape scale systems that once existed underneath our city systems. So even a place as developed as Los Angeles, I can still go out and see the Pacific Ocean and notice the pocket coves and beaches and bluffs and dunes and lagoons that occur along our coastline, these borders between the marine and terrestrial ecosystems prior to them, you know, being artificially filled with sand and regularly groomed for recreational enjoyment. Similarly, I can go out and I see the mountains, you know, and I see that due to being located within a Mediterranean climate, as Rachel mentioned, these mountainsides are blanketed with these amazing dense shrublands. And I see how these mountains end up connecting to other mountains within the region that also have this kind of odd east-west orientation rather than north-south like a lot of our mountain ranges we see across the U.S. And understand how these transverse ranges end up contributing to a diversity of different microclimatic conditions, and that these different microclimatic conditions end up resulting in a beautiful array of different assemblages of chaparral, coastal sage scrub, forest, woodland, riparian, and a bunch of other natural vegetation communities, which end up making LA and the California floristic province that it falls within, you know, deemed one of the 36 global biodiversity hotspots across the world. So I see these kind of contiguous montane systems, you know, much before they were fragmented by our transportation infrastructure that do a good job of connecting us, but kind of disconnecting natural communities. I see these hillside communities, you know, before engineering advancements and increased incomes allowed for development to bleed up into these hillsides with a lot of houses, very big houses. And similarly, I can still see the rivers and the streamways the way that they used to be naturally occurring in Los Angeles when they were rushing down from these hillside topographies during the winter season when the rain and the snow would come. And they would braid across the flattened basin landscapes. You know, I can see them and still understand them prior to how they are now in their channelized conditions, thanks to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and other folks who have helped make sure that we in our development are safe from floods. So I understand how these natural systems have been converted into infrastructural systems over time based on our development, and really be able to help folks to understand that kind of merger between the two and how it is that we can still have our infrastructural systems in place, but really help bring back a lot of the ecological life and vitality to the ecosystem portion of that system as well. And so I can then start re-seeing the city. You know, our coastlines are still here, our mountains are still here, our floodplains are still here, the rivers are still here. We might be doing a lot of different kind of uses within those areas and treating them very differently, but they're still here, and we can still, again, bring back a lot of that ecological function to these systems. And, you know, managing large landscape systems in this kind of way within cities as actual systems is quite essential for revitalizing their functionality and ensuring the sustained health and resilience of these systems over time. Real true biodiversity and ecosystem health is only going to come when we create that really contiguous landscape matrix instead of one that's highly fragmented like we see in a lot of cities. So we really need to, again, be thinking about how it is that we are connecting all of these different patch habitats together. And these connections can be happening on a small block scale, on a neighborhood scale, and they can even be happening at a much larger kind of regional scale or statewide scale and even national scale. And creating these connections amongst these kind of systems and their associated natural vegetation communities then provide really great key opportunities for connections for wildlife too. Even apex predators, such as the mountain lion, our famous P22 mountain lion is photographed here, which is one of the really awesome fun projects I get to assist the city with addressing right now due to the fact that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife recently listed the mountain lion as a candidate species under the California Endangered Species Act. So due to the diverse array of land ownership that we actually have within cities, creating this kind of large landscape scale habitat and connectivity requires a lot of different strategies that essentially end up addressing both public and private lands. Public lands, which are managed traditionally by entities like the Forest Service, National Park Service, California State Parks, those are more of the easy part. These entities are pretty familiar with managing land through the lens of ecological health. But the question then becomes, how can we actually be helping to encourage this type of perspective and approach on private property that is speckled within and between all of these public lands within urban environments. So instead of ecosystem managers, planners are actually the ones who regulate land use within cities. So planning departments can actually play key roles in addressing kind of this ecosystem management and health, which is exactly what the Wildlife Pilot Study is doing. So the Wildlife Pilot Study is an innovative approach to managing both public and private land that is being spearheaded by the City of LA's Department of City Planning. And as I mentioned, it's one of the main efforts that I'm here to assist with at the City of LA. And ensuring that development that occurs within our city takes place in a more sustainable type of a manner not only really helps to bolster our biodiversity and connectivity, but it also really is helping to address a lot of the other goals that we're trying to achieve here in LA as well, such as climate resilience, fire safety, watershed health, and overall kind of public health as well. This effort to address the need to manage urban ecosystems at a variety of scales and a variety of land use types and ownership is first off kind of identifying where within the city of Los Angeles these ecologically significant areas are actually occurring, and you see that shown in green on the map. And then within those areas, we're developing a set of regulations through a proposed wildlife ordinance that would take a really holistic approach to enhancing the urban ecosystem. Such standards that we're coming up with and proposing are related to yard setbacks, buffers from key resources, fencing requirements, lot coverage, slope grading rules, new standards for windows, lighting, and trash enclosures, and even vegetation and landscaping standards, which of course end up directly relating to the enhancement of the urban forest. So specifically within the vegetation and landscape section of the proposed wildlife ordinance, regulations will essentially expand the traditional efforts to enhance the urban forest beyond just public parks and streetscapes to be looking at other essential parts of the city that have trees and or should have trees, such as within these key ecologically significant areas that were shown on the map 2 slides ago. They kind of serve as these amazing source populations for plants and animals that can then come down into our more urbanized conditions. So the proposed ordinance also aims to take this really a holistic ecosystemic approach that addresses not only the importance of an individual tree, but also the ecological structure and function of the habitat and landscape patch of these properties and the broader context in which the tree or property is located. And so the regulations are aiming to achieve this by extending tree protection beyond the current protected tree ordinance to also address mature trees or significant sized trees, whether they are native or non-native. The proposed regulations are also looking to require a certain percentage of property be landscaped with plant species that are specifically adapted to our local climate and conditions here in LA. These species will be provided on a preferred plant list that's set forth by the city and correlated with the city and county's fire-safe planting zones and protocols. And the regulations are also looking to prohibit the removal of things like dead trees and the planting of things like invasive species. So together we're really hoping that these regulations will not only address individual tree health, but will really be helping to enhance our urban forest via this really great holistic ecosystem-based approach. The city plans to release a draft of this wildlife ordinance for public comment this spring with the hopeful anticipated adoption by the Los Angeles City Council by the end of this year, 2021. So if you want to stay tuned and updated on the Wildlife Pilot Study, I welcome you to follow the link below at that website or join our contact list by emailing ourla2040@lacity.org. So taking this kind of broader landscape scale and ecosystemic approach to managing the urban ecosystem is essential. But I also mentioned that another kind of essential portion of managing urban ecosystems is really addressing that entire life cycle of a tree and all the various steps and stakeholders that can ensure that the urban forest will be enhanced and sustained over time. So here in Los Angeles, we're doing our best to connect the dots between all the different stakeholders and steps in the process that are really pivotal in ensuring that enhancement of the urban forest, which will in turn help to enhance the health and vitality of our social systems and our communities here as well. So everything from, again, collection all the way through the final planting process. So rather than just focusing on planting itself, how can we really start with the seed? How can we really work collaboratively with various nonprofits and individuals to collect and process native seed that is coming from within our local region, that is adapted to our local region, that then can be planted out and grown out in our local region as well. How can we then really start to look at our land use patterns and identify these underutilized sites or land within the city of Los Angeles? This photograph here is showing some old nursery infrastructure at a nursery location in Griffith Park that used to function as a municipal nursery for the city of Los Angeles prior to the 1970s. So how is it that we can think about repurposing some of this underutilized land within a place like Los Angeles and converting it back into these active nursery sites where we develop amazing public-private partnerships between city departments such as Rec and Parks and a bunch of other nonprofit partners to really help reinvigorate these sites into active locations that are not only growing plants but are really helping to test out a lot of great strategies for best management practices that are also relying on using a lot of urban waste stream materials for actually building and operating the nurseries. And then how can we continue to collaborate with existing nonprofits such as City Plants and others that distribute these locally grown plants throughout our community via free tree giveaway programs and other types of planting events. And then we have the slew of other nonprofit partners whose focus is not only on the tree planting itself, but also on the watering and the general maintenance and stewardship of our urban forests and of these urban ecosystems. So how can we really start to be thinking about ways to create and provide green-collar workforce development opportunities that are really focused on training our own community members who are living here within Los Angeles so that we can ensure that these projects that we're investing in that are building biodiversity and converting this gray into green infrastructure are really successful in the long run because they have the right specialists in place to care for them. Not only because these specialists and these folks enjoy doing so, but because they're also employed to do so. And then finally, how can we really be thinking about connecting also to existing community science and research and academic efforts that are happening to where we can be really charting our successes and making sure that we're measuring our achievements and being able to then, adaptively manage the ecosystem based on what it is that we're seeing is working and not working over time. So again, focusing on just one aspect such as planting will do us and the urban forest a disservice in the long run, as this step is reliant on so many other steps that, must also be taken into consideration, addressed, and coordinated with, kind of this entire system in itself. Since we have siloed a lot of these efforts into different departments or sectors for efficiency's sake, we really have to make a concerted effort to connect these efforts together and to take a more systems-based approach to ensuring that each step and aspect is synced up and coordinated in a way that will truly enhance the urban forest. And in doing so, we can also be addressing a lot of the other systems that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Our riparian systems, our montane systems, all of these different types of systems within our cities. I always say that a box isn't so good at solving problems, so it's about time that we thought outside of it and really start taking a more kind of collaborative, connected, systems-based approach to the work that we're trying to do through conservation. And the great part about managing entire systems within cities is that it also inherently ensures that we are creating more equitable investment. Since these landscape scale systems, the LA River being shown as the example here on this slide, they end up, bisecting through a ton of different demographics that we have. So it ensures that our solutions for making our city more livable are not just focused within one community, within one income bracket, within one race, but really it helps to span the entire spectrum and benefit all Angelenos. As humans, we're often, overwhelmed by complexity, and we're taught, I think, from an early age, the phrase "too many cooks in the kitchen" can complicate things. But what my training as an ecologist has taught me is that diversity and complexity actually contribute to overall stability of a system. Removing one entity or one, link or one dot is not necessarily ideal, but with so many others in the mix, it will not necessarily cause an overall collapse of the system's operation, since there will be others that can pick up and kind of carry on. And this is essentially what ends up ensuring that these processes remain sustainable or resilient in the long term. So I always like to promote the concept of the more the merrier. And not only does this cross-pollination end up increasing efficacy of our work and our efforts, but it also makes for a much more enjoyable experience and outcome. I like to liken it to this kind of concept of collaboration to music, where you think about when one note is played in isolation, it holds very little meaning or value on its own. But when you start to connect those notes together, the result ends up being music, and that's where really some of the best harmonies are found and can be appreciated. So when managing urban ecosystems, within cities to actually be more livable for us as humans as well as for plants and other animals, as an urban ecologist, I find it essential to see and observe those ecological systems that are still really here within our urban environments and understand how it is that they've been altered due to our influence as this keystone species in these habitats. I then work to convey this perspective to others to help inform strategies for increasing the health of those urban ecosystems. And then I really work to identify key steps that must be taken and the stakeholders who are essential for taking those steps, and then help to catalyze those connections between those stakeholders and between those links in the chain to really create this more sustainable systems-based solution approach that considers all aspects of the urban ecosystem. Which ultimately ends up ensuring that these ambitious goals and policies and plans can actually be implemented and sustained over time. So I've really thoroughly enjoyed assisting the City of Los Angeles with all the variety of efforts that I've been able to, that really address the health, stability, and livability of the urban ecosystem for the past year. Although due to budget cuts, my position as an urban ecologist for the City of LA might dissolve in a handful of months and not be converted to a fully institutionalized position, I really hope that what I have shared today helps to inspire others to take this kind of socio-ecological system-based approach to advance your efforts and to keep this important type of perspective and collaborative approach going on the national level. So if you would like to learn, more about the multitude of exciting efforts underway here in the City of Los Angeles, or would like to discuss how to better integrate a socio-ecological perspective or expertise into your city, county, company, department, nonprofit organization, or community, please feel free to reach out to me via email, or you can drop me a line via my personal website as well and contact me through that. So thank you again to the U.S. Forest Service for inviting me to be part of today's webinar, and to the other presenters who I now look forward to fielding some questions with.